drab, rainy day in Leicester this morning, and I'm hoping you'll enjoy this show. We'll be talking about Brexit, how it's going to affect you, and we've got two very, very special guests who have come in, especially to the studio today, and we'll hopefully be joined with a third special guest as well. You're listening to Radio Ramadan, EAVA FM 102.5 FM, and if you want to call into the studio, if you've got anything you want to say about this subject, if you want to talk about Boris Johnson, or you like his hairstyle, or there's any comment you want to make, please feel free to give us a call on 0116 212 9324, or you can text us on 07450 925084. I'll repeat the numbers again: 0116 212 9324. Text number is 07450 925084. You're listening to Radio Ramadan on EAVA 102.5 FM. I want to say a warm welcome to both our guests, especially from the great boroughs of Oadby and Wigstone and Market Harbour District. So I'd like to introduce the first guest. We've got Councillor Linda Broadley, who's a county councillor in Oadby and Wigstone, and also a borough councillor in Wigstone, and a magistrate as well, I think. No. Former magistrate then. No, sorry, I'm getting confused with somebody else then. Yeah, so welcome to the show, Linda. Just give us a little bit of background about yourself. What do you do?
Well, I'm actually retired now, but I've been a borough councillor for the last 12 years, and I'm on my 5th year as a county councillor.
Excellent. And my other guest is Councillor Phil Knowles from Harbour District Council, leader of the Liberal Democrats at Harbour District Council. Welcome to the show, Phil.
Yes, good morning.
Excellent. Now, recently you've had council elections. How did you fare over in Oadby and Wigstone, and why do you think that was the case?
It was a great success in Oadby and Wigstone. We actually increased our majority. We have 26 councillors in Oadby and Wigstone, and 24 of them are Liberal Democrats. And I think it's because we are hard-working councillors. We listen to the people. We certainly do our casework. When anybody rings us up, that we don't ignore them. We respond immediately.
Excellent. And how did you fare over in Harbour District?
Well, we did very well. I mean, we saw the reduction in the size of the council, but we actually saw an increase in the number of Liberal Democrats, and we were very pleased, and we managed to top the poll in quite a number of the wards, and we also saw some very significant gains in as much as we saw one of the main members of the cabinet lose their seat to a Liberal Democrat, and we also saw the incoming chairman, which is equivalent to the mayor should have been taking office this time, actually losing his seat to a Liberal Democrat. So we were very pleased with the result.
Excellent. Okay, and how do you think the current situation in politics, would you describe it as a mess, both of you? What do you think the current scenario on the national scene is?
Certainly on the national scene, it's a total mess. The left hand doesn't seem to know what the right hand's doing. We have infighting in the two main parties, and I think that the Liberal Democrats are the only one that don't seem to be at each other's throat.
I think I'd have to agree with that. I think the main problem we have, Zafar, is that the best word to describe it for me is chaos. There doesn't seem to be any certainty. There's very little planning, and there seem to be too many personal agendas that are flying around at the moment at a very senior level within the government. And I think for our country, that has to be a very worrying thing for the future. It has to be resolved, and very quickly.
Excellent. What do you think is the problem? How has this all really started? How did we get to this point? How did we actually start off with the referendum? So how did the referendum arrive actually, Phil?
Well, I think what we had was a referendum which was more or less an offering by the then Prime Minister, David Cameron, to try and calm down what had been infighting for many years in the Conservative Party. And I think it's fair to say I don't think David Cameron ever believed that he'd have to deliver on that promise. I think it was made to try and calm his troubled waters. And when he found himself with a majority, unexpectedly, the Lib Dems had been able for the period of the coalition government to keep these things in hand. But of course, when the Conservatives found themselves with an overall majority, he was forced to deliver on the referendum. And I think that was the last thing he wanted. And I think he realised that he was heading for trouble.
So this was all really done quite clearly by the Conservative Party. The whole idea of the referendum on Europe was their idea, and they pushed it forward when they were in power in 2015.
Yes, and the problem being is that the question that was asked was so nondescript that, I mean, I know a lot of people say they knew what they were voting for. I don't see how they could. There was not enough description on the ballot paper, and also the fact that there should have been something in there that says about whether, you know, the majority, there has to be a bigger majority. The majority that the Leave campaign got was so small that it shouldn't have been allowed. And had this not been advisory, it would have been declared null and void because of the cheating, which 3 times Leave campaign has been found guilty of lying and cheating during the referendum.
I think, if I can just come in on that, so I mean, I think the situation you have is that if we look at the simple mathematics of this, on such a major change, we should have had the question thought out far more carefully. It was done in haste. And if they had put on there that the majority to come out of the European Union had to be 60 to 40 or 65 to 35 or whatever the figure needed to be, that's what they should have done. I think the problem they've got is that, unfortunately, they were panicked into holding this referendum. And the net result of that was that, having been panicked into holding the referendum, we ended up with an indecisive result and the chaos that we now have.
I'd also like to introduce our third guest, Councillor Samia Haq, who's a councillor in Oadby and Wigston. She's been a former mayor of Oadby and Wigston as well. Welcome to the show this morning.
Thank you very much.
Now we're talking about the referendum. So we had the referendum result. The result said that we should leave the EU. 17.3 million people voted for that. Why should we not enact that? And why should that we not leave as the people public requested? And what consequences has that happened on our lives, really?
Sorry, Linda, please, yes, carry on.
No, we shouldn't enact it because it was done through fraud. It's been proven in 3 different courts that it was done through fraud. Why, you know, that isn't democracy. Like Phil says, the majority was so small, and the fraud, it just makes a laughing stock. We've turned Britain into a laughing stock because of this, and it has a big effect on everybody's lives. If you've only got to look at the NHS, you've only got to look at how people are being marginalised. It is totally wrong.
I think that the situation as well, Zoffa, is this, that if you look very closely at the situation we're in, if you go and ask 10 different people who voted to leave, and I believe they voted to leave in good faith, they were given the information and they based their decision on it. But the problem you have is if you ask 10 people why they voted to leave, you'll almost certainly get 10 different answers, and those 10 answers will be contradictory. So you can't possibly deliver on everybody's idea of what Brexit should be. And I think the bottom line is, whatever way this actually pans out, I think we're in the situation where we have to say to people, okay, this is the final idea, this is the final plan, and we have to then put it back to the people and say, are you happy with this? Is this what you believe Brexit would be?
Any comments by Samia Haq?
Yes, I think from my point of view, when we got the result of the referendum, I was a bit sceptical about calling for a people's vote because I think democracy, people had decided, and I was in 2 minds whether there should be another vote or not. But as the time has gone on, it's been 3 years. We've had 2 casualties of this Brexit from Prime Minister's point of view. We had David Cameron resigning, now we've got Theresa May resigning, and when she came in, she said Brexit means Brexit. But nobody knows what Brexit means. And it has done enormous damage to our country, has done damage to the communities around the country, and it has done damage to our country internationally. So I think now people are allowed to change their mind. They should be given another vote. And if our MPs in Parliament can't decide for us, then I think it should go back to the country.
Right. We're talking about Brexit and how we ended up with the referendum and the results of the referendum. You're listening to Radio Ramadan on EAVA 102.5 FM. If you're joining us, you can join us on Facebook as well. Our telephone number, if you've got any questions on this subject, is 0116 212 9324, or you can send us in as text message, which is 07450 925 084. You're listening to EVA FM 102.5 FM, and we're joined on Facebook by Sumaya Umar and somebody else, Suraya Adam also joined, Tariq Islam also joined, Sahel Rawat also joined Ramadan on Monday, and we are talking about Brexit. We're talking about the referendum. Now, the other question I want to say, we are supposed to be held in high esteem across the world internationally as the founders of democracy, the political machinery of the UK working so well. And why have we fallen apart in such a spectacular way? I mean, what is the view of the outside world looking into Britain? Phil, I know you travel the world and you go many places. What is the international view?
Well, as recently as 10 days ago, I was over in Italy, and I was chatting with people from Switzerland and obviously from Italy, France, Germany, and even from Russia. And they all have a real deep concern about the situation that we now have in the UK. They struggle to understand why we've taken the decision to almost isolate ourselves, to remove ourselves from a market of over 500 million people, and to sort of contract back into our own shells. They see us as a very major player within that European group, someone with a very strong voice, someone that's at the top table and who speaks with authority. And they're now questioning what's going to happen when we withdraw from that, and what our international standing is going to be. And I think for me, the whole thing was summed up by a very senior businessman from Switzerland who said that when you look at the situation we're in now, significant damage has been done to the UK's reputation as to the way this has all been handled. If we decided to stay in, and this is his view, if we decided to stay in the European Union, then he felt that within a number of years, maybe 5 or 6 years, we could rebuild that reputation. But he's exceptionally fearful, he said to me, that if we come out of the EU and we go on to this almost isolationist way of doing things, and talk about World Trade Organization rules and all these sort of things, and I think we can talk about that a bit later probably, Zoffa, we're in a situation where people are going to be saying, well, the UK has gone into isolationism, and effectively it could be 20 or 30 years before we see the economy recover to the level that it is, and that we also see the standing of the UK back to the place that it should be in the international market.
And also, what are the consequences of us now? We had the referendum vote. We voted to leave. Linda, you mentioned earlier the NHS. What's the feelings like, and how do you find your own personal experiences now?
I think the NHS is in desperate need of help. It was something that they were promised by the Leave campaign, which has turned out to be a total lie. We have staff leaving in droves. Personal experience, my husband has cancer, and we have long delays getting treatment, we have long delays to see consultants, and we are not alone. The Leave campaign, as it is now, and the politicians want to privatise the NHS. Well, my husband would be dead by now, because not many people can afford the private health care that they are proposing. The NHS is the best thing that's happened to this country, and because of this Brexit, we are going to lose it if we continue down the path that we are.
Do you think a lot of doctors and nurses were disillusioned by that vote and decided to leave?
Yes, definitely. Definitely. Not just the doctors and the nurses, but the staff behind the scenes. It's everybody within the NHS. I think the way they're being treated has been appalling.
So you actually think it's done the opposite effect? It's damaged the NHS instead of... Because a lot of people during that election campaign, I think, were thinking this would benefit the NHS, but it's actually done the reverse.
Well, we actually have people out now, I think in the Philippines, trying to recruit nurses.
Yes.
Because as Linda said, the damage that has been done is immense. And we're now trying to recruit nurses in the Philippines because we don't have enough nurses now here in the UK. And that's tragic. But I think there is another thing as well, Zoff, which is interesting, is that if you look at the situation with the European Medicines Agency, that was based in the UK. There were 800 jobs there, but those 800 jobs have gone now and they've moved away to Amsterdam. But when you look behind that figure, you're not just talking about the 800 jobs at the European Medicines Agency in London. You're talking about 35,000 visitors that used to come there every year for conferences, for meetings, and for whatever else. So that's 35,000 trips to there, 35,000 hotels, restaurants. It's the infrastructure behind the supply chain. And you have to look behind the figures to really get to the truth on these things.
So there is real economic problems with that as well.
Massive economic impact.
We have a message coming in. Salams, good morning. Interesting and relevant issue you're discussing this morning. The situation in our country is now polarized. This is a very dangerous place to be in, as it will increase hostility towards minorities and anyone who is perceived to be different. We are where we are, and we have to now find a way to work together to minimize this damage. What are your thoughts? How can we minimize the damage? And we are where we are.
Well, I think the situation for me is that I feel extremely blessed because I have a very wide range of friends from many communities, and I think that when you talk to people right across the communities, there is a genuine fear about exactly where the country is going, and I think that one of the main issues for me that needs to be addressed by the new incoming Prime Minister, whoever that may be, is that we have to get away from these polarisation issues. We have to talk more about certainly a global Britain, but we have to be somewhat inward looking to try and repair the damage that's been done to our communities and to our own infrastructure.
The second part of the show, we'll be discussing the runners and riders for the new prime ministerial post. So it'll be interesting to bring this point in then, who can bring the country together. But any other thoughts about, how this is polarised?
I think the place we're in at the moment is extremely dangerous, and partly it's due to the campaign that the Leave campaign ran in 2016, and I was actually horrified to listen to Nigel Farage saying on television that wouldn't you be scared if you had 5 Bulgarians move next door to you and the little old lady, how would she feel? And that kind of rhetoric, I think it was just done to scaremonger, and it's extremely dangerous, and we are in very polarized situation where half of the country is on the left and half of the country is on the right, and to deal with that, I think Europe is not perfect, but to make changes, you have to be in it to win it.
I think Samir makes a very important point there. What seems to have been severely eroded here is the middle ground. And that has to be really worrying. Because if you've got two extreme opposites, left and right, and very little in the middle, then I think we really do have a serious issue. And I think Samir's...
But people need to look up to the politicians to have social leadership, to actually bring the country together. And that doesn't seem to be happening. That does not seem to be happening on any of the major parties at the moment.
The thing is there, Zoffer, is what we said earlier on. There are too many personal agendas that are floating around here at very senior levels. And I think one of the things that has to be looked at quite closely and in great detail is what adverse impact those personal agendas are having on the wider community. Because it's all right having the aspiration to be Prime Minister or to hold a senior office of whatever level, but you have to ask yourself, can you do the job, and what can you bring for the community that you're there to serve?
You're listening to Radio Ramadan, EAVA 102.5 FM. Our phone number is 0116 212 9324, or you can text us on 07450 925 084. Linda, what are your thoughts on this as well?
I think that unfortunately we've always had a hidden away, if you like, percentage of the population that have extreme views. And unfortunately, because of people like Nigel Farage, it's brought out those people that think it's acceptable and okay to have the type of views that they do, which has frightened a lot of people. And I think it is the job of the politicians to stop this. It is the job of the police to stop this, that things have got to be taken seriously. When people report race, hate crimes, whatever, it needs to be stopped in its tracks. They seem to be given a free rein at the moment, and that to the majority of this country is not acceptable.
But I think that we are in dodgy waters, because if we have Boris Johnson as Prime Minister, him comparing us to letterboxes, I think God help us if we have him as Prime Minister.
We're going to come on to that, and we'll have a lengthy discussion about Boris Johnson and all the rest of the contenders for the leadership of the Conservative Party and becoming the next Prime Minister after the break. European elections, Nigel Farage, apparently, according to the polls, has done really well. So what are your thoughts on who's done well and how he's done so well?
I'm a bit sceptical about this. Nigel Farage has done well. If you look at the polls, some of them you can't rely on anyway. The results aren't out until 10 o'clock tonight. So how people can speculate, I do think that it might have been a low turnout from just listening to people. Hopefully that the Lib Dems have got a good response from people, because they are the only party that has been consistent to remain in the EU.
And the results are out tonight, so I think the ballots closed on Thursday, and the whole of Europe will effectively be counting the votes tonight, and the results will be known later on this evening, probably very late on this evening.
Yeah, I mean, the rest of Europe is voting today in the main, so obviously that's one of the reasons why our count can't take place until today. So once the polling stations close across Europe, then in effect, Europe will have decided. And I think one of the interesting things for me is going to be to see just how the difficulties that we've started off here in the UK with the division and the Brexit and all the other issues that are being discussed, to see how that's knocked on across Europe, because it's certainly been a huge topic of discussion, and I think it's given a groundswell to some of the more controversial opinions that may be expressed in other countries.
And how do we deal with this rise of new parties coming in? I mean, it's astonishing when you think that a party set up only 3 or 4 weeks ago has done so well. There must be some kind of support behind the scenes, or is it just a fragmentation of the political setup that was previously around? Because parties just don't pop up in that kind of style normally.
But can you class it as a party, because it's a limited company? It's not actually a political party. You cannot be a member of Nigel Farage. He's taken donations, which is under investigation. So I am very dubious about a lot of the claims for his party, for his company.
You're listening to Radio Ramadan on 102.5 FM, EAVA station. This is a really, really interesting topic. We've had some real good discussion in the first part of the programme. We're going to be talking about Boris Johnson. We're going to be talking about the Conservative Prime Minister, whoever that might be, after the break. If you've got any views on that, please give us a call or text in, or you can follow us on Facebook. And please listen to the conversation. Join us after the break. You're listening to Radio Ramadan on 102.5 FM. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back, Radio Ramadan on EAVA 102.5 FM. We're doing the political review this morning, especially because of the current news over the last week and the dramatic changes in the political life of the UK. You can telephone us on 0116 212 9324 if you've got any questions or any comments that you want to make, or you can send us a text message on 07450 925 084. We had a message coming in just before the break. Our politicians are divisive. Extreme views have become mainstream, and the Tories are falling over themselves to align themselves with these views. The middle ground has to unite and face this challenge locally, nationally, and globally. And comments about Trump, Boris Johnson, and Modi as well. How do we find this situation that we're in? We have these different views, and we had the European elections recently, and obviously we've got several different parties expressing different views. How would you class each of the parties and their views, Phil, on these issues of Europe?
Well, I think whether we like it or not, you have to sit and look and say that Nigel Farage is at least clear with his message, what he wants, and the Liberal Democrats have been exceptionally clear. We've said for many years what our views are. Unfortunately, within the rest of the parties, it's almost a case of pay your money and take your choice, because people are sitting there and you've got some people who want to stay in, some who want to come out, some who don't know what they want to do. It is really quite a mess. We've had the Change UK party, which has launched, which I think, in fairness, people were expecting that was going to do great things, but it doesn't appear to be showing very much traction at all. So I think at the end of the day, the only word I would use for the whole thing is total. Well, two words is total confusion.
So, and I think that sums up British politics just generally. I think there has been a bit of clarity from a couple of the parties, and I think those two parties will do extremely well in the European elections when we hear the results.
I don't happen to agree with Nigel Farage by any means, as you would expect me to say, and I totally, hope that the Lib Dems do well when the votes are declared. But you have to say they are the only two parties with a clear message. The rest of them, it is total confusion.
I find it fascinating that people would vote for Nigel Farage when he has no manifesto, that you cannot become a member of his party, as I've previously said, and yet people will vote. He is a one-trick pony, if you like, that is the only thing. He sails in, causes discord amongst everybody else, and then sails out again. And I personally find it horrifying that people would vote for a pub politician.
It's almost like a self-selection, though, of his candidates. If you don't have a membership.
Well, one of them lives in France.
Well, so he's a European already.
He's a European. He lives in France, and yet he stood in the European election in this country, but wants to come out. It just beggars belief, really.
At least we can say that his party is for Europe. He's selecting candidates from Europe. Yeah. I think that one of the main reasons for the two parties, that is a Brexit party and the Lib Dems, at least they're giving out clear message. Brexit is, okay, they want to take us out from the European Union, and the Liberal Democrats want to stay in. So people are actually looking for clarity. And the two main parties have failed to do that. They've failed to give public a clear choice.
Yeah, that's excellent. You're listening to Radio Ramadan 102.5 FM. We're listening live and we're talking about the news review, talking about the political state of this country and which direction the political arena is running in at the moment in time. You can give us a call on 0116 212 9324, or you can send us a text message on 07450 925 084. Theresa May's gone this week. Are you surprised? It's shocking that you have prime ministers come in and going out so quickly. We've had a reasonably good run previous to that, where we had a steady stream of prime ministers. Tony Blair was in for 10 years. You had Gordon Brown in for 3 or 4 years. We had John Major before that. So what's going on in the political world? Were you surprised?
Definitely wasn't surprised. I'm surprised that she lasted as long as she did. She's the second Tory MP to go because of Brexit, and I would certainly predict a third is on the cards.
So you would say the next one who comes in will be gone quite quickly?
Yes, they're going to have exactly the same problems having a divided Tory party that Theresa May had. The deal will not be accepted. Most of the MPs in Parliament are saying that they won't accept no deal. So where is this new Prime Minister going to go? They're going to have exactly the same problems. The only way to sort this out is to put it back to the people.
So not only do we have ministers, cabinet ministers having a revolving door, you think actually number 10 will have a revolving door very shortly?
Most definitely.
So the famous black door on number 10 will go and we'll have a revolving door like you're going into a hotel.
Poor old Larry the cat won't know who's coming and who's going.
Well, he's the only constant at the moment, really. So the cat at the number 10, everything else seems to be on the move.
Maybe the cat should take over. That might be a great
I did see that suggested, but...
So Theresa May has gone. So is that a surprise to you, Samia or Phil? Is that
not at all? Not at all. I think I am surprised as just as much as Linda that she has lasted as long as she did. I would have thought that she would have gone after the first time she put the deal to the House of Parliament, to the MPs, and it was rejected. Okay, maybe she lasted the first time, second time, but to go on for the third time, I was extremely surprised. Though I was a little sad to see her go when she did her ending speech, and she was quite emotional.
I think for me the only surprise is, as Sammy's just said, that she lasted as long as she did, because there have been so many opportunities. If you listen to the political pundits of the last weeks and months, they've been expecting it. But I think it's got to a point where the Prime Minister had to concede that she could do nothing. She can't get the deal through Parliament, and I think the important thing is that the mathematics hasn't changed. You might well change the person who's got the steering wheel, but you're not changing the direction of travel here, and it is so split, so diverse as to what people will do and how they will vote in Parliament, that I can't see a new Prime Minister making any difference at all.
So you think the revolving door's there, definitely?
I think the revolving door's there, but I think more importantly, I think the only way to solve this and to solve this fragmentation of the politics that we have now is to literally agree to take this back to the people and in the form of a general election. Because certainly I think, we can't carry on like this. I mean, we've got a parliament which is virtually paralysed.
This has consequences, businesses, the economy, the foreign currency markets. How's that going to affect people on the street too?
Well, the uncertainty with the money markets, I mean, it's quite concerning, because businesses don't know how to invest, if to invest, or what to do. If you look at the situation you've got with Jaguar Land Rover, with Ford, with Honda, if you look at the situation you've got with British Steel, on the face of it, you're talking about 6,000-7,000 jobs which are uncertain, but actually you're talking about 25,000-30,000 jobs on the supply chain. Those supply chains don't know whether to invest. They don't know what sort of financial constraints will be on them when they do invest, what the exchange rate's going to be. Imports are becoming more difficult. I mean, I know people who've been spending millions, and I mean millions of pounds, on bringing in buffer stocks to try and ensure they don't get caught out when Brexit actually hits, if it hits. Now, they bought that in, but companies have to find the money from their cash flow to pay for that. So there are some fairly serious events somewhere down the track here that we've not seen the light of yet.
I think the other thing that's going to make a huge difference is now the leadership competition in the Conservative Party. We won't have a Prime Minister, so that will take another 8 weeks to select another a Prime Minister for the country, and then they've got to negotiate the deal. So it puts us backwards in the whole process of negotiating a deal. And some people are talking about crashing out without a deal, and I think that's going to be hugely disastrous for the country.
We'll discuss that, because there's a lot of people are talking about what's this no deal scenario. First of all, Linda,
you've got to look at the money that this government has wasted. At one point we were told austerity had finished. Now we know, we knew that was a lie anyway, that it continues. But the money that they've wasted on preparing for no deal, that with the ferry company that didn't even have any ferries and everything else, and that companies have actually done, then they called a halt to it. Now, in the last few days, they're upping the ante for no deal again. So that's more money that's going to be wasted. I just want to comment on something that Samir said earlier about the Theresa May's speech. I certainly have no sympathy for Theresa May in her ending speech. Where were the tears for the Windrush people? Where were the tears for the Grenfell victims?
Fair
there were
point.
no tears there. It was purely tears for the end of her own career.
Geoffrey, if
That's
I
a
just
fair
say one
point.
thing about this on the finance side as well. I mean, they keep talking about crashing out with no deal, and they all keep referring to WTO rules, World Trade Organization, and we're going to do that. There is not one single country in the world that trades on them because they're just not practical.
I was reading up about this, and I was reading the articles, and I think the WTO rules are that you don't have any deals, trade deals,
No, exactly.
with anybody. You have to start from scratch, effectively,
Yeah.
and all it does is gives you the baseline to start off from.
Very much so. You're absolutely right. And for me, that is a real danger to our economy going forward, because we're coming out of, if we leave the EU, out of a situation where we've been part of a huge 500 odd million market, and we've had the certainty and surety of the rules to sort of protect us. And it's all right that the Prime Minister, as she is now, saying, well, we're going to closely align ourselves with, or we're going to adhere to, or use all these phrases. The practicality of working that when you actually move into an open market and you're trying to negotiate with China, you're trying to negotiate with America, people are not going to be rushing to give us deals. We were told that we'd have all these deals lined up, and it simply isn't happening.
I think probably the WTO rules are a basic framework, and each country has to negotiate their own tailored terms and conditions. So I think that's what we have to do.
So that's the case for no deal, and that will have, what kind of effect would that have on us if we went out with a no deal as a country, which is obviously being currently talked about, and various different candidates are talking about no deals. So no deal, by the sounds of things, isn't a real viable option.
No, I mean, there's speculation that if we do have a no deal option, that it's going to impact, and I've heard various figures quoted of between £1,500 and £3,000 impact on every family. And that's a huge amount of money to people. That's their disposable income you're talking about, and the money they need to look after their families. So for me, this has to be sorted out one way or the other.
What you're talking about is almost like a self-inflicted depression or recession.
Yeah, exactly. I think, and it is self-inflicted.
The thing is, it's already affecting people. The uncertainty is already. I mean, there are thousands of jobs that have already gone. There are, if we go out with no deal, there will be certainly thousands of more jobs that have gone. The cost of living has gone up. Wages haven't kept up with it. So all the mess and the confusion that we have at the moment is already having a big impact on people's lives. But this is just the tip of the iceberg, because if we leave, certainly if we leave, whether we have a deal or no deal, the impact on people's everyday life is going to be horrendous.
You're listening to Radio Ramadan on EAVA 102.5 FM. Our telephone number is 0116 212 9324. Is anybody out there? Or is everybody sleeping this morning, taking it easy? What's going on? There's no phone calls. You can always send us a text message, 07450 925 084. If you're enjoying the programme, please send us a message or any comments or questions. You can follow us on Facebook as well. We're talking about Boris Johnson now, and we're going to be talking about the whole process of who's going to be the next Prime Minister. There's a huge question mark about this. What is actually the process? Because a lot of people are confused out there, think that we should be having a general election to actually, for the public to be able to have a say on their next Prime Minister. But in this case, that's not going to happen, is it?
No, I mean, where we are with this is that, very simply put, the Conservative Party will have its runners and riders on this, and I think there's speculation, according to which political people you look to, as to whether it's going to be 10, 15 or 20 prospective future Prime Ministers. From there'll be a series of ballots in the House of Commons amongst the parliamentary party.
So nobody else has a choice?
No, nobody else has a choice in that.
So it's a straight selection rather.
It's a selection.
Selection by the MPs for the final two.
They will reduce it down to the final two, and once they have the final two, then that will be put to the Conservative membership But at the moment, everything will hinge on almost a parade amongst themselves as to who they're going to vote for, a popularity parade, and then that person will be selected. So you'll end up with two people, and those two people will then be put for the vote to the Conservative membership.
So it's a selection by the selected, effectively.
Absolutely right.
Do you not see the irony in this is the fact that they are saying that it would be undemocratic to put this back to the people when, you know, Theresa May put it to the people to Parliament 3 times, that Nigel Farage is going around saying that MEPs are not democratic because they are unelected, but we've just had an election for the European. And now, like when Theresa May became MP, she was unelected by the PM. When she was unelected by the a general election, she did have one, lost a majority. We're now going to have another Prime Minister that will be actually unelected via a general election.
And you've got several names in the hat already. They're adding up very, very rapidly. You know, we could have almost 20 people fighting for becoming a Prime Minister. I'm amazed to see the number of people coming out at the moment just saying that we're putting our name forward to become Prime Minister. Are you doing that, Phil? Are you putting your name forward as well? Or
well,
is that
I'm not sure
possibility?
there's a vacancy. I think that at the moment, the way it's going, I mean, it's going to be a case of whose turn is it next?
It's amazing that people want to take the poison chalice, which is what it's going to be, because like we've already said, it's a revolving door.
I think I like Linda said, I do find it ironic as well that we talk about democracy and we're going to have second or third Prime Minister from the Tory party who's not elected by the people. So people will actually feel betrayed that when it was the general election first, they voted for David Cameron as the Prime Minister, then Theresa May got the post, and after her general election, now we're going to have a third Prime Minister in the Tory party who's not elected by the people, and that's just not fair.
It's strange when you talk about democracy, and we are looked up by the rest of the world as one of the most viable democracies and most effective democracies across the world. So who are the favourites to becoming the Prime Minister, to take hold of the keys of number 10 and look after Larry the cat?
Well, at the moment, the favourite is Boris Johnson.
I think
clown.
listeners would be horrified by that.
We are all horrified by that. Regardless of who it is, and there are a number of people which I'm sure we're going to talk about, but I wish that people would look at their history. Look at the history of them as an MP. What have they done to serve the general public? Because most of them, in the roles that they've had, have been against the people. Certainly they've not worked for the people.
There's another thing here, I think, as well, that whoever actually ends up being Prime Minister, you have to look back at their track record and their comments. And I mean, last night I was listening to another radio station's offer, and they were carrying some lengthy comments that were made by Boris Johnson about President Trump. And, when you listen to the comments that he'd made, you do struggle to see how he's going to actually sit down and negotiate a trade deal, with some of the comments that were allegedly made. So I think, there's the problem there. As you say, the runners and riders at the moment, it's just a mess. I mean, again, and I believe they're all running, to a degree with a genuine belief that they can do a job for the country. But you have to sit down, you have to look at it and say, are they the right people for the job? And I think we're only going to find that out, regrettably, once they're in office. And certainly we found out with Mrs May, when she was in office, that she couldn't deliver as Prime Minister because she hadn't got the numbers to get anything through. And the one thing you can't have in government is uncertainty. And I think we're going to have more uncertainty, and the sooner we have a general election, the better.
I think what's worst of all is that Boris Johnson has been tipped as mini Farage. So whatever we do, we're going to be in a big mess.
So what are his chances? Because assuming he gets down to the last two by MPs, and he gets selected as the last two to go to the Conservative Party membership. He'll be so the Prime Minister will be decided effectively
He
by the members
won't
of
get
the
that
Conservative
far.
Party.
He won't get that far. If you look at the past favourites, not one of them in the last, I think it was five. It was quoted as five selections of the Tory leader. The favourite has never won. So fingers crossed, wind in the right direction, that Boris Johnson ends up as dust.
But I think whatever happens in the candidates who are putting their names forward, I think most of them have similar views to Boris Johnson. And whatever we do, I think it's going to be doom and gloom. Sorry to say.
So, if he does get to the last two, how popular is he with the membership of the Conservative Party?
Yeah, this is the problem, because what you have is Boris Johnson is almost hailed as some sort of hero by a lot of the grassroots of the Conservative Party. And the difficulty that you will have is if he gets down to the final two, I think he's then odds on to win. And that would be extremely dangerous. I mean, I can only hope that for the benefit of the UK going forward, that he doesn't end up at the final two. And as I say, I think whatever happens, I would certainly make the call right here and right now to whoever the new incumbent is of number 10 Downing Street to take the earliest opportunity to go to the country with a general election, because they need a mandate, and at the moment they don't have a mandate, they don't have the numbers, and if the support they're getting from the DUP collapses, then there is no way forward for the Conservatives governing at the moment.
But do you really believe that the Conservative Party would actually go to an election bearing in mind that they haven't done that well in the recent council elections?
It may be forced
and
on
the
them.
European elections, maybe.
Yeah, it may be forced on them. I think the whole thing is you don't know, none of us know, what's going to happen when the new Prime Minister comes into office, what the view is going to be of the party who are currently holding them in office. Because let's not forget, they don't have a majority in Parliament. And if they lose the supply and confidence agreement that they currently have with the DUP, then they are in serious trouble. So I think at the end of the day, they may be forced to a general election, and the sooner the better.
Do you think the parties could actually split?
Yeah.
Could there be splits in the parties?
They could definitely split. I mean, if you look within the Conservative Party, it's a very broad church at the best of times, which is always welcome in a political party, but unfortunately they are very, very split at the moment in several directions. So I can well see that if they don't get to grips with this, you could well see the Conservative Party splitting.
Not every Tory was a leaver. There are Remain, and I would have liked to have seen one of the runners and riders to be a Remain MP, Dominic Greaves. I think he would certainly sort out a lot of problems that the Tory party had got. Unfortunately, he probably doesn't have the numbers with the ERG and their stronghold on the Tory party.
And Samia?
I think I would rather see the Tory party split than let them split our country, because what the referendum has done is called for renewed referendum in Scotland. Nicola Sturgeon, he's pushing for another referendum in Scotland, and that would split our union. And I would much rather see the Tory party split than let them split our country.
We've got a message coming in. The truth of the matter is people don't trust politicians. It's easy to be critical in opposition, not once in power. The dynamics change. The reality is, I think that probably does happen to a degree, but the reality is that you've got to make things change when you're in power. You've got to make things right for the country.
Yeah, and you have to be accessible. I think the biggest thing that any politician has to be is accessible to the public, and to make sure that they deliver on the promises they make.
We're running out of time, but I want to say a big thank you to all of you. Linda, Samia and Phil, thank you very much for coming in. It's been an excellent show. Please join us next Sunday. We're on between 11 and 12, so please join us next Sunday. Assalam.